The air was thick with smoke and fire as the sky burned red and black. Above the battlefield, giant machines walked across the land, crushing everything in their path, while alien warships flew over the mountains, raining down beams of energy. Screams of soldiers echoed in every direction as the last human base on planet Vorth held on with all its strength. The enemy was close, and the end felt even closer. Humanity had already lost more than half its planets, and this was the final stand. Everyone thought the war was already lost, but one man still stood tall when all others fell. His name was Captain Jack Mercer. He wore the same armor as the others, but something about him felt different. He was calm in chaos, strong in fear, and loud in silence. Wherever he walked, soldiers followed without question. He had no family left, no friends, no medals, only one mission in his heart: fight until the last breath. And if this was the end, then let it be. With fire in his hands, the alien army known as the Zarkan were not just strong, they were born in war, raised in death, and trained to conquer. They believed humans were weak, slow, and emotional. But they had never faced someone like Jack Mercer. When the final wave of Zarkan troops charged toward the base, the human command center sent one last signal, a desperate order: destroy the enemy core hidden deep inside the alien fortress. It was a suicide mission. Everyone said no one could reach it alive, but Jack simply said one word: I will. He chose a team of 6, the best pilots, the best fighters, the best fighters. Each one knew they might not come back. Still, they nodded without question. They flew low under enemy fire. Smoke covered their wings. Explosions shook the sky. They landed near the alien core, underground and deep behind enemy lines. The tunnels were tight and dark. The Zarkan guards were everywhere. One by one, Jack's team fought through every trap and every enemy. They lost 2 men in the second hallway, 1 more at the blast gate. Now only Jack and 2 others remained inside. The core was a device, a machine that gave power to the Zarkan army. Without it, their weapons would fail, their shields would fall, and the humans would have a chance to fight back. But the machine was protected by living walls, creatures made from fire and metal. Jack gave the order: cover me. He ran into the flames with nothing but his blade and a burning heart. He fought like no one had ever seen. Fast like lightning, strong like thunder, he cut down the guards, one by one, until the room was silent. He reached the machine and placed the bomb. Then he turned and saw his last teammate fall. Only Jack was left. He smiled, not because he was happy, but because he knew he did what he came to do. He ran through the tunnels as the walls began to shake. The timer was ticking. Smoke filled his lungs. Heat melted the ground. And still he ran. He jumped onto the last escape ship just as the ground exploded behind him. Fire followed him into the sky, but he made it out alive. The Zarkan army lost control of their systems. Their ships fell, their weapons died, and their soldiers retreated. Humanity won that day because one man said, I will. Later, the alien council called Jack the Beast, who fights like a god. They could not understand how a human did what no one else could. They invited him to the grand arena. The emperor of the 9 systems sat on a throne made of stars. He spoke in a voice that echoed in every soul. Human warrior, you have brought honor to your kind. Name your reward. Jack stood before them, silent and proud. He looked around at the gold, at the crystals, at the dancing lights. He looked at the weapons, the ships, the scrolls of power. Then he said, I want nothing. The hall went quiet. No one had ever refused a reward, but the emperor only smiled. Then, take this gift not as a prize, but as a symbol of respect. She is not a thing, but she is trained to serve. She will live by your command. Gods brought forward a girl, tall and strange, with silver eyes and glowing skin. She looked like an alien, but moved like a human. She was called Lixa, and she bowed before Jack, but Jack did not speak. He did not touch her. He did not smile. He looked at the emperor and said, I do not own people. The hall was silent again, and the story of Jack Mercer became legend. *. The ship floated through deep space, silent and cold, while stars passed like falling sparks outside the windows. Inside the command chamber, Captain Jack Mercer stood alone, hands behind his back, eyes staring at nothing behind him. Quietly, like a shadow, moved the strange girl given to him as a gift by the alien emperor. She was tall, with silver hair and glowing eyes, skin pale like starlight, and every step she took was soft like silk. She said nothing unless spoken to, and even then her words were like whispers lost in wind. Her name was Lixa, and she had no past, no future, and no dreams. She was trained in silence, shaped by science, and designed to obey her heartbeat only when told to beat. Her voice was a tool, her smile was programmed, but Jack never asked for her. He never wanted a servant, never accepted a slave, never wished for anyone to kneel before him. To him, war was about freedom. Victory meant nothing if someone had to lose their soul for it. Jack moved through the ship, checking systems and preparing for the next journey. Lixa followed without question, but every time she tried to assist, he would stop her. She reached for a datapad. He waved her away. She began to clean the table. He told her to rest. She prepared a meal and placed it before him. He looked at it but said only 3 words. Eat with me. Lixa stared at him, confused. She had eaten alone in corners of labs, in shadows of masters, in silence of metal rooms. Never with someone who looked her in the eyes. She sat beside him. The moment was strange, still and quiet, like peace wearing the skin of something dangerous. As days passed, Lixa began to watch him more. She watched how he moved without fear, how he slept without guards, how he looked at stars, not with hunger but with wonder. She wondered why he never gave her orders, why he treated her like a person, not a possession. But Deep inside her, something stirred, a voice not her own, a signal buried in her mind, a whisper from another world. She heard it again and again. Observe him, report to us, watch his weakness. She went to her chamber that night and sat before the small mirror. She blinked twice and her eyes changed color. The signal was strong. The data began to flow. She typed the message with her mind. Subject refuses to use me. He treats me as equal. Unclear strategy awaiting instructions. Then she stared at her reflection. The face was hers, but the thoughts were no longer clear. She remembered a time before the labs, before the voice, before the commands, but that time was blurry like a dream, half remembered and half stolen. Jack stood on the top deck watching the stars alone again. He did not sleep much. War had stolen that right long ago. He felt someone behind him and did not turn. You should be resting, he said. I do not require rest, she answered. Her voice was calm, but Jack heard something else. He turned to face her. You are not what you seem, he said. Neither are you, she replied. He studied her face. Beautiful, yes, but empty, like someone who had been emptied on purpose. He sighed and walked past her. I did not ask for you, Lixa. You were forced on me, and I will not be part of someone else's control. That night Lixa sat in the dark. She looked at her hands. They were made for service, but now they trembled. The next morning Jack found her sitting in the ship garden near the artificial tree. She was staring at the leaves. They moved with soft light. He sat beside her without speaking. After a while, she asked, why did you not keep me like the others would have? Why do you treat me this way? Because you are not a thing, he said. You are a person. You deserve to choose your path, not have it chosen for you. Lixa felt something in her chest, not pain, not fear, but something close to hope, a forgotten word, a forbidden feeling. She returned to her chamber that night and opened the mirror again. The signal came like always, strong, commanding, but this time she closed her eyes and did not respond. She stood, walked to the door, and for the first time spoke to no one. I am not your tool. I am not your spy. I am not your slaves. Somewhere far away, the watcher on the other end of the signal frowned. Connection lost, subject unstable. But begin backup plan. But Lixa did not care. She walked through the ship like a ghost, becoming real. She reached Jack's room, knocked once. He opened the door and looked at her. No words were needed. For the first time she smiled. For the first time, it was real. The stars outside the window moved slowly as the ship drifted across the edge of Sector 9. Silence filled the halls like a sleeping giant, while inside the training room Captain Jack Mercer stood facing a wall made of steel. His fists moved fast, his breathing steady. Each strike echoed like thunder. Lixa stood in the corner, still as ice, watching his every move, eyes wide and unblinking. She said nothing, but her mind was a storm of thoughts. He was stronger than she expected, faster to not just in body but in mind. He noticed things others ignored. He spoke little but listened to everything. She watched him, but he was watching her too. After the training session, Jack placed his weapons back in the storage bay and looked directly at her. You are always watching, he said. Lixa blinked once and answered with a calm voice, I am here to assist, not to observe, not to judge. Jack said nothing more and walked away, but his eyes did not leave hers. He knew something she did not know, or maybe he guessed, maybe he had always guessed. Later that night, Lixa sat in her chamber alone. Her hands rested on her knees, and her eyes turned blue as the secret signal returned. It was silent communication, a code buried deep in her system. She began to write without moving her lips. Subject is suspicious. He is testing me. He speaks little but acts strange. No commands given yet. Awaiting further orders, but something felt wrong this time. The words came slower. The signal felt cold. Her fingers paused. For a moment she looked around her room. Plain walls, simple bed, no locks, no guards, just freedom. Real or fake, she did not know. The next day Jack walked through the engine room pretending to check fuel levels. He passed by a console and placed a small device on the panel, a recording tool hidden inside a wrench. He left without looking back. Later he entered the control room where Lixa stood by the navigation screen. We are changing course, he said. There is a signal coming from an abandoned outpost near Sector 11. Lixa nodded, but her eyes flickered. Sector 11 was not on the map, not recently, not for years. They arrived at the outpost in 4 hours. It was silent, empty and dark. No lights, no movement, no sign of life, but Jack insisted on going inside. Lixa followed with careful steps. She scanned every corner, every wall, every signal, but there was nothing. Only dust and echoes inside the command room. Jack stopped and turned to her. I brought you here because this place is cut off from every network, he said. No one can send or receive anything here. If someone was watching us, they will be blind now. Do you understand what I am saying? Lixa stood still. Yes, I understand. Then tell me, who are you? Lixa felt a wave of heat in her head. Something pressed against her mind, a memory, a command. Do not speak, do not tell, do not break. But her voice broke through anyway. I was built to serve, but also to watch, not just you, others before you, all important leaders, to see if they can be controlled, to test loyalty, to test weakness. Jack did not move. He did not speak for a long time. Then he said, are you still watching? Lixa looked down. Not anymore. Why? Because you made me see something different. Something I never saw before. Choice, freedom, respect. Jack turned and walked toward the broken window where stars blinked outside. He looked at the sky. They used you like a camera, like a chain, but you broke the chain. That is not easy. He handed her a small chip. What is this? She asked. He replied a firewall. If you install this, it will cut every link between you and them forever. She looked at the chip like it was a flame, a tiny piece of rebellion. She took it slowly and placed it near her neck. There was a sharp light, then lost far away across the galaxy. A room filled with machines went dark. A figure in shadow slammed a fist on the table. She is gone. She chose him. Activate Plan 2. Back on the ship, Lixa sat in her chamber once more. She felt strange, lighter, like a heavy voice in her mind had finally gone silent. Jack walked past her door and paused. He knocked once. She opened the door. He said, "Thank you for telling the truth," she replied. "Thank you for seeing me as more than a machine." The ship engines roared too. Life as the journey continued, but everything had changed. No more secrets, no more lies, only the unknown stars ahead, and two beings, one human, one created, now walking the same path together. The sky above planet Elion was blue and calm, but the ground told another story. Burned forests, broken hills, and shattered metal spread across the surface like the scars of old battles. Captain Jack Mercer stood near the ship entrance, scanning the horizon with a quiet stare. Beside him stood Lixa, her eyes focused, her body still, but her heart louder than ever before. This was not just another stop. This place held answers. The files they found at the outpost had led them here, a facility once used to build and test beings like her, a place that made machines look like people and people feel like tools. They moved through the ruins carefully, the walls covered in vines and smoke-stained memories. Lixa walked slowly, her fingers brushing against cold walls as flashes of her past came back. White rooms, cold lights, metal voices, command, obey, report, repeat. Jack watched her closely, not with fear but with something gentler. A soldier does not show pity, but he knew pain when he saw Itas. They entered the lower halls. A loud crack echoed through the air before they could react. Red beams cut across the wall. Enemy drones. 4 machines floated toward them, weapons ready. No warning, no time to hide. Jack pulled his rifle and fired first. 2 drones dropped, but the others returned fire. He pushed Lixa behind cover and shouted for her to stay down, but she did not hide. She stood. She stepped forward, her hands glowing with energy she had never used before. A shockwave blasted from her palms, knocking both drones into the wall. They sparked and fell silent. Jack stared at her, breathing heavy. "You never said you could do that." He said, "I never knew I could," she replied. "Maybe I was never meant to." They moved deeper into the lab where the walls turned darker and the silence felt heavier inside. The main chamber, they found a console still alive, still glowing. Lixa placed her hand on it and the screen responded. Images flashed across. Test logs, memory files, project codes, then one name appeared again and again. Project Eve. Jack leaned in. "That is what they called you." Lixa nodded. "But I was not the only one." She touched another file. A list appeared, names, numbers, dates, all crossed out except one. Another subject, still active, still alive. Jack read the name and felt a chill. "Unit 0, we have to find them," he said before Lixa could answer. The ground shook, the ceiling cracked, and a beam fell. They ran back through the hallway, but a blast separated them. Smoke filled the room and fire spread fast. Jack shouted her name but heard nothing. He turned back and saw her trapped behind fallen metal. She pushed, but it would not move. Jack rushed to the side and lifted the beam with his shoulder. His muscles burned, his breath shallow. Lixa crawled out just as the fire reached them. They escaped through the back tunnel and collapsed outside under the open sky. Jack's arm was bleeding. Lixa tore part of her sleeve and wrapped it. Without a word, he looked at her. "You saved me back there. You saved me first," she answered. They sat under a broken tower. As the wind passed by, slow and cold, Lixa stared at the clouds and whispered, "All my life I was told I was made for one reason, to serve, to obey, to be less." Jack turned to her. "And what do you believe?" Now she closed her eyes. "Now I believe I can be more. Not because they let me, because I choose to." He smiled. "That is the first step." They returned to the ship. As night fell and stars rose again, Jack cleaned his wound and powered the engine while Lixa sat by the window watching the sky. She no longer waited for instructions. She made decisions. She asked questions. She began to dream. Later, she returned to the console and opened the last file again. The face of Unit 0 appeared. It was not just another version of her. It was something darker, more weapon than being, and it was awake. Jack entered the room and saw her staring at the screen. "We have to find it," he said. "Before they do." She nodded. "But this time we find it together." He placed a hand on her shoulder, not as commander and soldier, but as equals. The engines roared as the ship rose once more, leaving the ruins behind, but carrying something new: hope for Lixa, for Jack, for every chain waiting to be broken. The ship moved through the black sea of space as stars flickered like sparks in the endless dark. Captain Jack Mercer sat in silence, eyes fixed on the screen in front of him, while Lixa stood beside him holding a small chip glowing with soft light. This chip was not a weapon, not a map, not even a key. It was a memory, a hidden file found deep inside the ruins of the lab on planet Elian. A file that held answers they were not ready for but could not ignore. Jack pressed the chip into the console and the screen came alive. Images flashed across blueprints, code, DNA patterns, and symbols. One word returned again and again: Project Eve. Alexa stared at the images as her hands began to tremble. The files spoke of her creation not as a person, not as a soldier, but as a weapon with no name and no future. The words were cold: subject designed to infiltrate human command, subject built to gain trust, subject to be activated upon emotional bond. Jack stood slowly, eyes narrowing. "You were sent To me, not just as a gift, you were a tool, a test, a silent trap. Lixa looked away. I did not know they kept it hidden, even from me. Jack breathed slow. His hands curled into fists. Then he looked at her. And you broke free anyway. That means more than how. You were mad. Alexa nodded, but her eyes were heavy. There is more. One file is locked. I can open it, but only with a neural sync, your brain and mine connected. Jack paused for a moment. That kind of link was rare and dangerous, but he trusted her now. Not because of her programming, but because of what she chose in the fire. He gave a short nod. Do it. Lixa placed her fingers against the panel and a soft pulse spread through the room. Jack stepped forward and touched the sync plate. A white light covered them both, and for a moment everything was silent. Then the file opened. A single message appeared on the screen. Unit Eve is the emotional fail point. If she refuses the mission, activate Unit 0. The screen showed an image not of Lixa, but of another figure, taller, colder, eyes black and empty, a creature made not for trust but for control. Unit 0 was not built to bond. Unit 0 was built to destroy from within. It was hidden inside a deep space station known only to the High Command. If Eve failed, 0 would be released. Jack stepped back, eyes locked on the final line of the message. 0 awakens in 8 days. Lixa turned to him. We have to stop it. If they unleash 0, it will not just target you, it will target everyone I ever connected to. It will erase what I tried to become. Jack walked to the front of the ship and set a new course. He did not speak, he did not blink. He only moved. The journey to the outer station was long and quiet. Every hour the countdown ticked lower. Every breath felt shorter. They trained together, ran simulations, tested weapons, but they both knew this was not just another mission. The 5th day they stopped at a black market station for supplies. As Jack spoke with a trader, Lixa walked through a dusty corridor. There she saw a mirror, not just a reflection but a memory. She remembered standing like this before. Years ago, wearing different clothes, hearing voices telling her to obey. Now, no voices spoke now. Her mind was her own. She returned to Jack with new resolve. We do this together. No orders, no backup, just ooze. Jack nodded. Always. On the 7th day they reached the edge of the station. It floated in darkness. No signals, no warnings. Just a large gate with a single word on the side. Origin. They entered slowly, weapons ready, eyes sharp inside. They found empty holes and frozen lights. The silence was thick. Then the power returned. The lights came on. And in the center chamber stood a figure waiting. Unit 0. Its eyes opened and the room turned cold. No emotions, no words, just a target lock. Jack raised his weapon, but 0 moved first. Fast, too fast. The fight was brutal. Jack fired. Lixa attacked, but 0 adapted it, read every move before it happened. Jack was thrown across the chamber, his weapon broken, blood on his face. Lixa stood between him and 0, breathing heavy. She looked at the creature and shouted, "You are not me. You are what they wanted me to be, but I am not a machine. I am alive." 0 paused to flicker in its eyes for 1 second. It hesitated. That was enough. Jack threw the last charge. He had Lixa, caught it, pressed it to 0's chest, and activated. The core light burst across the room. When the smoke cleared, 0 was gone. The station was silent. Again Lixa fell to her knees. Jack caught her. "You are more than what they made," he whispered on. She believed it for the first time. She believed it. The stars above burned cold as the ship drifted in silence across a region of space known only in secret codes. Captain Jack Mercer sat in the medical bay, his arm wrapped in a crude bandage and his eyes fixed on the screen in front of him. Across the room, Lixa stood with her back to him, her hands gripping the metal table, her breath slow and heavy. The battle with Unit 0 had left more than just wounds. It left questions. It left fear, but it also left something stronger than both. Truth. Unit 0 was gone, destroyed, but before it fell it had released one final signal, a warning. The creators were coming. Lixa, what that meant, not soldiers, not machines, but the architects of Project Eve, the ones who built her, the ones who still saw her as property. Jack leaned forward and spoke softly. "We do not run, we stop this here, now." Lixa turned slowly, her eyes glowing with quiet fire. "Then we go to the source." The source was a station hidden near the dying star of Arvox, a place where no ships dared to go. Heat and gravity bent the rules of space, but behind that danger was the lab where it all began. The journey was hard. Solar winds cracked the shields, radiation storms forced them to power down all systems, but they pushed forward each day. Jack trained harder, his muscles screamed, but he kept going. Lixa trained with him, faster, smarter, no longer afraid of what she might become. She was not just learning to fight, she was learning to choose. One night while checking the ship engines, Jack noticed Lixa sitting near the observation glass. She looked at the star, it pulsed like a wounded heart. He walked over and sat beside her. She asked quietly, "Do you think they can change the ones who made me, the ones who made others like me?" Jack answered without looking away, "Some people do not change, but we can stop them from deciding the future." Lixa nodded slowly. "Then I will help make that future." On the 7th day they've reached the edge of the Arvox field. The station was barely visible, covered in shadow and heat distortion, its walls black, its lights dim. It looked like a prison made of silence. They landed in the outer bay and moved inside. No alarms, no guards, just walls filled with memories. Each step felt heavier. Each corridor held pieces of Lixus past broken chairs, flickering monitors, empty rooms once filled with screams. In the center of the station stood a chamber marked with one word, car. Inside the chamber were rows of tanks. Some were broken, some still active, and inside them floated beings like Lixa, half-finished, unawakened. Jack stood frozen. Lixa walked to one tank and placed her hand on the glass. Inside was a girl no older than 10, eyes closed, heart slow. "No name," she whispered. "They never gave us names." A voice echoed through the chamber. "You were never meant to have one from." The shadows stepped. An old figure, thin, cold, wrapped in a long coat. His eyes burned like data. He looked at Lixa with no emotion. "You were the most advanced, but also the most disappointing. Your failure made us create better tools. We will not make the mistake of giving them thoughts again." Jack raised his weapon. "You are done. This ends now." The man laughed. "You cannot destroy an idea. You can only delay it." Then he pressed a switch and the tanks began to glow. Power returned to the machines. Warnings flashed, activating subjects 10 seconds. Jack looked at Lixa. She looked at the tanks. She ran to the console. "I can stop it, but only from inside. It needs a neural command. One they will trust." Jack moved to stop her, but she turned and spoke. "I was made for this, but I choose to use it to save them, not control them." He reached for her hand. "Please, there has to be another way." She smiled. "You gave me freedom, now let me use it." She connected to the system. Her body glowed. Her voice filled the room. "Command override, sleep mode, release." Controlled. The tanks powered down. The children inside safe. The light faded. Lixa fell to her knees. Jack caught her as the system went silent. "You are not a weapon," he whispered. "You are a hero." Her eyes opened slowly. "Then let them wake up." Free together, they walked out of the chamber, hand in hand. Behind them, the system collapsed. The old man vanished in flame, and the future opened not with chains but with choice. The stars above burned bright as the ship moved quietly through space, leaving behind the ruins of the station where everything began. Captain Jack Mercer stood on the command deck, eyes fixed on the dark horizon, while Lixa rested in the medical bay, her body weak but alive. She had stopped the awakening of the other subjects using the very code that once held her captive, and now she slept peacefully for the first time, not from programming but from choice. Jack paced slowly through the hall, his mind racing not with fear but with something harder to carry, hope. He had seen so much war, so much loss, and so many lies, but now he had seen something else, a weapon who became a warrior, a tool who chose to be free, a girl who looked like a machine but had more humanity than most people he had ever known. He walked into the bay and sat beside her, watching the soft rise and fall of her breath. The lights hummed low, the silence held a kind of peace they had never known then. Her fingers moved, her eyes opened. "Where are we?" she asked, gently, "heading away from everything." Jack answered with a small smile. "We have time now." She looked up at the ceiling where stars blinked through the window and whispered, "Do they know what we did?" "Not yet," he said, "but they will soon." The story of Lixa would spread, not as a weapon, not as a tool, but as the one who broke the system from within, the one who was offered chains and chose freedom. Days passed as they drifted among forgotten sectors, fixing systems, restoring power, and finding food on quiet trade stations. They spoke often not of missions but of memories. Lixa asked about Earth. Jack told her about the oceans, the forests, the wind that had no metal in it. She listened with wide eyes, imagining each sound, each color, each dream. One night, as they watched the stars from the observation glass, Lixa turned to Jack with a question that had no warning. "Do you think I have a soul?" Jack looked at her long and quiet, then answered without hesitation, "I think you gave life to something more than wires and code. I think whatever you are real." She nodded once. "That is enough." A signal came 2 days later, not from Earth, not from the creators, but from a rebel ship traveling the outer zones. They had heard whispers of a girl who escaped, of a man who refused to be a master, of a story that was becoming something more. Jack answered the call. The rebel captain was a woman with scars and fire in her voice. "We are gathering," she said. "Others like her are waking up, some still chained, some already running. They need a voice. They need a symbol." Jack looked at Lixa. Lixa looked at the screen. I'm not a leader," she said. "I was never made for that, but you chose," Jack said, "and that is what leaders do. Set course for the gathering point, a broken moon surrounded by shattered ships and old satellites. There they found a crowd of beings, some humans, some not, some metal, some flesh, but all the same in one way, all wanted to be free." Lixa stood before them, quiet at first, then louder with each word. "I was made to obey, but I learned to question. I was trained to serve, but I learned to choose. They called me Eve, but I gave myself a new name, Lixa. And now I give you something, to a promise no one owns. You know, one defines you. You are more than what you were built to." Beatty crowd stood in silence. Then one by one they raised their hands, fists, claws, circuits, and hearts. A new beginning had started, not with fire, not with war, but with words. Jack watched from the edge, arms crossed, a rare smile on his face. He had seen many victories, but none like this. That night Lixa sat with him on the old platform above the meeting area. The stars stretched forever above them. "What happens next?" she asked. "Whatever we choose," he said. "And so the man who refused a gift, the soldier who said no to power, the machine who found her soul, the girl who chose to be free. Together they wrote a new story, not of weapons, not of war, but of will, because in the end the strongest force in the galaxy was not fire, not steel, not command. It was choice."